You are not too much. You've never been too much. You will never be too much. The very idea is preposterous because you were born to be you, all of you, not a tiny acceptable sliver, not a watered down version with colors dulled and edges softened. No, you were meant to be every last pulsing, bleeding, loving, crying, feeling bit. When I look at Penelope Featherington and go over her story, a story we're privy to from the very first episode of Bridgerton season 1, when I consider Penelope Featherington and the amount of hate and vitriol and anger that she causes in the minds of some fans of the show who can't stand her and constantly and very vocally proclaim her villainy for the whole world to see and hear, when I take my time to think on Penelope Featherington and how members of the ton well established within the universe of Bridgerton view her, how they mock her and dismiss her and ignore her and yet hang on to her every word when they have no idea that the words are hers, how they are desperate to find her and locate her and yet their eyes gloss over her, how sometimes they are amazed at her wit and her barb and yet sometimes they don't really see her or hear her and so she goes unnoticed for so long until one of them, the one who is considered her friend, her best friend, finally really takes the time to hear what she's saying and pieces together her secret and is upset and lashes out and breaks her heart. When I consider all these pieces and put them together, I realize exactly what is driving this many misinterpretations of her character. Penelope Featherington, especially within the context of the world of Bridgerton in which she is set, is a little too much. She's too fat, she's too witty, she's too loyal, she's too mean, she's too self-serving, she's too ambitious, she's too quiet, she's too independent, she's too desperate, she's too in love with Colin Bridgerton. And not everybody can connect with that. Not everybody can understand that the depth to which a person can go to when they are too much, feeling too much, acting out of all that overabundance of emotions that they've kept hidden inside until it bubbles over and they take decisions that otherwise more rational thinking people who have in some way learned to balance things out for themselves, who are definitely not too much, cannot really get. If you're someone who loves Penelope and is rooting for her, like I am, then there is a very high possibility that you too, like Penelope, are a little too much. Because you see, every time my thoughts come around to Penelope Featherington, and they often do, quite a lot, if I might add, I remember the quote I started this video with. You're not too much. You have never been too much. You will never be too much. The very idea is preposterous because you were born to be you, all of you, not a tiny acceptable sliver, not a watered down version with colors dulled and edges softened. No, you were meant to be every last pulsing, bleeding, loving, crying, feeling bit. Great words by Jeanette LeBlanc. They ping pong in my head with other words that have always dogged me. Words I'm pretty sure if you clicked on this video, you might have probably heard as well, either through your own inner thoughts or just as it's occasionally happened to me. Maybe someone in your life who you were open and vulnerable with used those words to hurt and dismiss you. Words like, you're too quiet, too angry, too soft, too masculine, too feminine, too mean, too kind, too witty, too fat, too thin, too smart, too stupid, too needy, too independent, too confident, too scared, too frigid, too slutty, too much. Society has a very interesting way of turning words into weapons, darts that find their way underneath our skin. They fashion them into structures, cages meant to hold us in our excesses, making sure we don't bleed beyond the confines of what they expect us to be, who they expect us to be. And when we do so, when we step out of line, they eat us with those words, you are just too much. The amount of people who I have seen still being mad at Penelope for what happened with Marina in season 1 of Bridgerton, who refused to move on from that, insisting that in that situation, Pen was too mean. She was too much of a bitch. She was too unkind. She was too self serving because she ultimately did it so Colin wouldn't run off with Marina. And you know what? Yeah, she was all those things. She is all of those things. So what? Penelope Featherington, as Lady Whistledown, holds no punches. She doesn't pull back. She would share and serve the gossip with the blistering wit that the ton have come to expect. Love and rue in equal measure. That is her business. That is literally what she is selling. That is what she is serving. That is how she earns a very substantial pin money. Way more substantial than Portia can ever possibly dream about. All in an era when a lady of good breeding isn't allowed to own her own business and so therefore cannot control her own financial affairs. Even though we can clearly see that, for example, Portia would run the Featherington household and businesses better than her late gambling husband, she wouldn't be given the chance to do so. Instead, the crown would rather the property pass on to someone who is just a distant relative because women in that era are treated as an extension of the men in their lives, as mothers, wives, sisters, or mistresses. And as much as Portia fights that, not every woman is as lucky as Violet Bridgerton with her perfect husband and perfect kids and perfect firstborn son who filled in the gap so admirably. Yes, am I going to always find a way to work in Anthony Bridgerton praise in every single one of my Bridgerton videos? Yes, yes, I will. Anthony Bridgerton, the man that you are. But back to Portia. As much as Portia fights the expectation, she does acknowledge the limitations placed on her by society and turns that ambition to other avenues, namely securing a profitable match for her daughters and manipulating the situation to serve her and her children best. Honestly, if not for how she treats Penelope at times, Portia Featherington wins Mother of the Year, hands down. Especially considering the other daughters she's been given, like Mother makes it work. I need to film in defense of Portia Featherington video at some point as well in the future. Ooh. So many video ideas. Once again, hit subscribe, like this video. Don't miss out on my upcoming Bridgerton videos because sometimes my thoughts takes me places. But once again, back to Portia Featherington and her ambitions and how Penelope took her mother's ambitions even further, because as much as Portia works her best to make the rules inherent in society work for her by operating within society's rules, Penelope does the same and does it even more. Why think only of getting a match when she can create endless wealth for herself by manipulating their society into hanging on to her every word and turning their obsession with all that hot, juicy gossip into money in her pocket? That is a clear case of being too ambitious in their world. And she did it covertly too. Not like Will Mondrich, for example, who society will definitely most likely punish for stepping out of line and taking on work so openly. But that's yet another video for another day. But back to Penelope Featherington and her ambitions. Penelope did that. She's the feminine icon a lot of Eloise fans believe Eloise to be. And I wonder if a bit of their anger at her and her decisions, which were honestly taken to protect Eloise, no matter what the latter says or thinks, is not rooted in that slight bit of jealousy that Eloise might say feminist things. But even she admitted in the early season, the first season, that Lady Whistledown, were she to be a woman, is really doing something admirable and different for the women of their time. She's taking actual steps and making money, her own money, which is such a radically feminist thing for a lady of the ton to do in their time. Like I said in my previous Bridgerton video, Eloise might have considered herself above things and rules that govern their society. She is a Bridgerton after all. And Eloise Bridgerton has been protected by her brothers and her family's wealth and estate and standing in society all her life, which is why she's able to take certain liberties and make so many decisions that would have otherwise ruined a lesser girl from a lesser family. But she gets away with it because she is a Bridgerton. And there is no way she would have been able to escape being ruined so irrevocably by the Queen, whose power way supersedes Anthony's authority as a mere Viscount, if Penelope had not stepped in and thrown a scandal her way to help divert attention from her, as the Queen would logically conclude that if Eloise truly was Lady Whistledown, there is absolutely no way she would damn herself so completely in the eyes of society. Penelope took a calculated risk to help save her friend. And both Eloise and the fandom keep punishing her for it, ignoring the fact that the only reason why that happened is because Penelope Featherington is loyal to her friend. Some would say too loyal, because she's so driven by what would best save her friend that she would cause harm if she assumes that it would ultimately serve said friend. Yes, she assumed that Eloise would never find out the truth, but at the same time, somewhere at the back of her head, she would have weighed it. A small scandal is much better than the entire Bridgerton family being ruined, Eloise included. And one could say that the gamble did pay off because we see Eloise back among society in the new season. Yes, she still scorns having to pretend to fit in. And what on earth is this conversation about embroidery and blah, blah, blah? But all the other young ladies defer to her, especially after she let them know that the Queen is still in search of a diamond for the season. And she does get a fairly good friend in Cressida, whose writing this season was so fucking brilliant. I definitely will do a video on her very soon. I would also like to explore how I think her story might possibly play out in season 3. So, yeah, even though Penelope hurt her, she didn't really ruin her. And she did it for Eloise, to protect her friend, who she is loyal to, above everything else. It's the same thing with Colin and Marina. Her loyalty to Colin weighed against her loyalty to Marina, and because Penelope is too in love with Colin Bridgerton, she sacrificed Marina to ensure Colin's happiness. Shaw is still convinced that Lady Whistledown did it out of malice, and it would be interesting to see how it plays out in season 3B, because Marina's storyline didn't really play out the way it did in the show in the books. But for the people who keep insisting that Penelope betrayed Marina's trust, I wonder if any of them actually considered the fact that Penelope has only known Marina at this point for a couple of months. She has no loyalty to Marina. She's known Colin and the other Bridgerton for years, since she was a child. She's loved him for that long. In what delusional world would she choose someone she barely knows, who is planning to entrap a man, something she wasn't comfortable with even before she knew it was Colin? The minute she found out it was Colin and asked Marina to not go through with it, and the other woman refused to listen, it was the confirmation Penelope needed to take action. Marina even realized that Penelope loved Colin and still chose to go ahead with it anyway. Ergo, she wasn't loyal to Penelope either. The only reason she continued was because she thought she would get away with it and believed Penelope didn't have the power to stop her. It is Penelope's love and loyalty to Colin that forced her hand and had her reveal the scheme, an act that also hurt her and her family, but for Colin and for his happiness and future, she was willing to accept that blowback. The Featheringtons became a joke. Penelope more so because of Lady Featherington's words. Does all that drama bring money to her pocket and ensure the eventual outcome that she wanted? Yeah. Did it hurt her regardless? Yes. But if you asked her, she probably would do it all over again because of just how much she loved Colin Bridgerton. And if we were in her shoes and are quite honest with ourselves, we probably would do something similar as well. I know I would. Even this season's theme of Penelope craving her independence, this refusal to sit as the unmarried spinster sister who has no choice but to stay home and follow her sister's directives and desires whilst taking care of their mother, pushing her to actively take control of her life and desperately seek a marriage that will get her out of a future that she sees herself actively hating, just shows how much she craves her independence and how it makes her too desperate. But her desperation and desire are perfectly valid to me. I understand why she would want to be free of the obligation of taking care of her mother in her older age. I get it. As much as I love Portia Featherington, I get why Penelope wants that escape. It's crazy, I know. I'm Nigerian. Taking care of our families in their old age is an expectation. It is culture. It is tradition. My stepfather passed away when I was 22. When he passed, my mother, who was a stay at home wife, became my responsibility. The money I made that was barely enough to take care of myself had to be shared to take care of my mom as well. It's what I've been doing for the last 11 years, taking on that burden. But I understand the why of it. I can't kick my mother out. And the only reason why I have not grown to resent her, and I'm being perfectly honest here, is because she still lives in the city of my birth, and I moved to a larger city for work. The distance, although it comes at an additional cost, means I can care for her from a distance, for my sanity and peace of mind. I should be afforded that. Penelope should too. Unfortunately for her, she lives in the Regency period where she doesn't have the agency to get her own grounds and estate. The only way she can get her escape is to marry, which is an altogether sensible plan. I would have preferred if she had married the titled Lord Deblin, as I mentioned in my previous Bridgerton video, but you know what? I am team anything that makes Penelope happy. I believe my girl deserves to get whatever she wants, even if it seems like she's being too greedy and grasping ahead of what society would rather she settle for. I want her to get it because why shouldn't Penelope get to strive for what she wants? Why should she sit demure in the back with people on one hand faulting her for fading into the background and being too quiet? She becomes a wallflower, and then at the next minute castigate her for writing the Regency equivalent of a Gossip Girl blog. And then they accuse her of being too selfish as a friend because why on earth would she not tell the Queen the truth about her being Lady Whistledown? Like the Queen would not have assumed that she was lying to save her best friend. And then they mock her lack of self-esteem for being so desperate that she has to beg Colin to kiss her. Like, pick a struggle. Because Penelope Featherington isn't perfect. She's flawed. She's a girl who is trying her best. She's a girl who is occasionally too much. And for those of us who love her and connect with her, it's because we see bits of ourselves in her and love her the way we want to love ourselves. It is that simple. Just as simple as hitting the subscribe button if you're not yet subscribed. Like this video if you haven't yet. Like I said, I have a couple more Bridgerton videos coming. So if you like my content and want more of me, do consider sticking around. My next Bridgerton video will be up next Wednesday at 5 p.m. EST. So keep an eye out for that. Once again, a huge thank you to my patrons who support me and my content. You all give me the space to keep making these videos. Thank you so much. If you'd like to consider supporting me on Patreon and joining my nerdy community, the link is in the description bar. Until my next video, which is coming out on Friday, I have a bookish tag video that I had a blast filming. Do remember, obsessing over the things you love, perfectly valid coping mechanism.